بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Today inshallah we'll continue our halaqah on the ahadith pertaining fiqh or the fiqh of tahara inshallah from the book Umdat al-Ahkam inshallah. Today we have our second hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. This hadith is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And when it comes to the narrators of the hadith, we'll talk more about them in the Riyadh Salihin class because we have a lot to cover when it comes to the text of the hadith in our fiqh halaqah inshallah. So the biographies and the stories of the Sahaba, we'll keep it for the Riyadh Salihin inshallah. In this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the prayer of anyone when he breaks his wudu or he does something that breaks his wudu until he performs wudu. Meaning, one of the conditions of your prayer is that you need to do wudu or you need to have tahara or you need to be in a pure state whenever you pray. Now, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Allah does not accept. Now this, by default, means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept, meaning your prayer is invalid. But sometimes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam might say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept something, and it does not mean the validity of something, but it means the complete ajr of something. For example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the prayer of someone who has alcohol in his belly. Meaning if someone drinks alcohol, even if they are sober, they're not intoxicated, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept their prayer. Does that mean that they have to repeat their prayer? The scholars say no. This doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he has to repeat his prayer or his prayer is invalid. It means that he will have no ajr. There will be no reward. It will be as if he didn't pray, meaning he have no ajr for that, but Allah will accept his prayer in the sense that he does not have to repeat it. Was that understood? Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will say, Allah does not accept something, meaning He won't give you the full reward for that. Another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that whoever goes to a fortune teller and asks them about something, meaning in terms of the future, and even if he doesn't believe what they tell them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept their prayer for 40 days. And does that mean a person doesn't have to pray? No, the scholars say the person has to pray. And if he doesn't pray, he's sinful. But when he prays, he will have no ajr for that prayer as a punishment for him going to that fortune teller. And how do we differentiate? The scholars have mentioned a few ways how to differentiate when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that He does not accept something, meaning the validity of something or the complete ajr of something. The way the scholars have mentioned is that we look at that condition or that thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stipulated or mentioned as a condition. Is that something sinful by default even outside of prayer or not? If it is, then it means Allah will not give you the full reward. And if it is not, that means it is something only for that particular thing, and that means the acceptance. And I'll explain more. Over here, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept your prayer until you do wudu. Not having wudu, besides the purpose of prayer, is it something bad? Is it bad to not have wudu? No, completely normal. If you don't, after Isha, you use the restroom and you don't want to have wudu, completely fine. It's better to stay in the state of wudu, but it's not a sin. It's not something evil to not be in the state of wudu. What does that mean? That wudu is only for the purpose of ibadah, for the purpose of salah. And hence, it becomes a condition for the acceptance and the validity of that ibadah. But when it comes to, for example, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the prayer of someone who has alcohol in his belly. Is having alcohol in your belly something sinful outside of prayer as well? Yes. That means over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the complete reward. Going to a fortune teller, is it sinful in itself, whether you pray or not? It is. You're not allowed to go to a fortune teller. It's haram for you to go to a fortune teller and ask him about the future. Hence, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that a condition for something, the scholars say this means that Allah won't give you the full reward, even though the obligation will be lifted, meaning you don't have to repeat the prayer, but you will not get any reward for that, and your prayer will be accepted, inshallah. So this is how the scholars differentiate between when the Prophet ﷺ says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept something until you do something. Was that clear? Okay, the second point is, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the prayer of someone until he does wudu. What is a prayer? Prayer, the word salah, in the Arabic language, it means to do dua. Outside of an Islamic context, the word salah means to do dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ, make dua for them. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma salli ala ali Abi Awfa, meaning, oh Allah, bless, or he's making dua for the people of Ali Abi Awfa, a tribe by the name of Ali Abi Awfa. So salah linguistically, in the Arabic language, means to make dua. When you put it in Islamic context or in a fiqh context, it has a different meaning. It means an act of worship that starts by, what does prayer start by? Takbir, ends by taslim, which consists of actions and sayings that are done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 5 things. Starts by an act of worship that starts by takbir, ends by taslim, and consists of certain actions and certain sayings. Anything that has these 5 things is called salah. So for example, our daily 5 prayers, no doubt that is considered to be salah. Salat al-Janazah, does it have takbir? It has takbir. Does it have taslim? It has taslim. Does it have sayings and actions? It has sayings and actions. Therefore, it is considered to be salah. Therefore, you need wudu. Therefore, you need wudu for salat al-Janazah. Was that clear? Anything that is classified as salah, you need wudu for that. Now the issue comes, for example, for sujood al-tilawah. When you're reading the Quran and you come across ayat al-sajda, do you need wudu to do a sajda or not? Now, performing the sajda in general is a sunnah, meaning if you don't do the sujood, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't punish you, but it's better for you to do sujood. It's a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when he would recite certain ayat, he would do sajda after that. Do you need wudu for that? Majority of the scholars say yes, because this is a salah, meaning you have to do takbir. When you go into sujood tilawah, you say Allahu Akbar, then you do your sajda, and you get up and you do taslim. Right? This is the opinion of majority of the scholars, that they say that you have to do takbir and you have to do taslim, and it consists of sayings and it consists of actions. Therefore, it is salah. Therefore, you need to do wudu. Reading the Quran without wudu is no problem. We cannot touch the Quran without wudu. You need to have tahara to touch the Quran. But if you memorize the Quran and you're reading the Quran from memory and you come across an ayah of sajda, you're not allowed to do sajda unless you have wudu. This is the opinion of the majority of the scholars. Some scholars have allowed it and mentioned that you're allowed to do sajda tilawah without having wudu. But the majority of the scholars have gone with the opinion that you need to have wudu, and because it is a prayer. Now tahara. We started off with the issue of having wudu or having tahara or having purification. What does the Muslim have to purify himself when he wants to pray? He has to purify himself from 3 things. First is the place where he's praying. The carpet you're praying, at home, wherever you're praying, you need to make sure that it is pure. It does not have any najasa. And inshallah, one day we'll talk about the things that Islam has considered to be impure in Islam. Secondly is your clothes. The clothes that you're wearing should be completely pure. There's no blood on it, there's no urine on it, there's no any other type of impurity on it. Thirdly is not something tangible, it is a state, which is your tahara. In terms of this, you have to be in a state of purity, and hence we do wudu. Wudu doesn't remove any tangible impurities from your clothes or from the place you're praying, but it removes the state of impurity that you're in. It's more of a metaphysical thing. It's more of a spiritual thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes the state of impurity from you and you enter the state of purity. Was that clear? You need 3 things: the place where you're praying, the clothes that you're praying in, and the state of purity. All these 3 things need to be purified from. And wudu is one of them, which is it takes away the impurity of the state of impurity that you are in, and it makes you enter the state of purity. Was that clear? Things that break your wudu. When does a Muslim have to? What breaks your wudu, and what makes it necessary for you to do wudu for the next prayer? There's a lot of difference of opinion that things that break your wudu, but we'll mention 7 simple things that break your wudu. First is, and we'll talk more about this detail in the following ahadith, but I'll mention them in summary over here. First is anything that comes out of your private parts. Anything that comes from your private parts, either from the front or from the back, anything, whether it's pure or impure, whatever comes out, it will break your wudu. You have to do wudu for that. That's the first thing. Secondly is anything that is impure that leaves your body from besides your private parts if it's a lot. So blood is considered to be impure, and if a lot of blood it leaves your body or you lose a lot of blood, that breaks your wudu. But if it's a very little bit of amount, then you don't break your wudu. So it has to be two conditions. Firstly, it has to be impure. For example, if a person cries a lot, are your tears impure? They're not impure. So no matter how much you cry, it will not break your wudu. Understood? First thing, it has to be impure. For example, blood of a person has a certain medical condition where they can't relieve themselves normally and they need to relieve themselves from other means. That also breaks your wudu because a lot of impurity left your body besides your private parts. But when it comes to the private parts, whether it's pure or impure, it breaks your wudu. Understood? The second is a lot of impurity leaving your body from besides your private parts. So firstly, it's impurity and a lot of it. So if a little bit of blood comes out, it doesn't break your wudu. But if a lot of blood came out, then that will break your wudu. So that's the second thing. The third thing is touching your private parts. If a person touches his private parts, whether the frontal private parts or the rear private parts, without any barriers, meaning there's no cloth between him and the touching was done by his palm, that breaks a person's wudu. But if the side of the arm touches your private part, that doesn't break your wudu. But if your palm touches, and the inside of your palm, not the outside, the inside of your palm touches your front or your rear private part, then that breaks your wudu. And this is not talking about the area around your private parts, for example, like your thighs or the area around your rear private part. That doesn't break your wudu. But touching the exact private part from the inside of your palm, that breaks your wudu. And as long as there's no barrier between touching that private part. This is also an issue that the scholars have differed upon. Some scholars have mentioned that this doesn't break your wudu at all, and some have mentioned, which is the majority of scholars, that it does break your wudu. The fifth point is losing consciousness, whether through sleep or whether falling unconscious, whether you might have for a medical reason or you might have blacked out and you lost your consciousness. Any type of loss of consciousness breaks your wudu, except for a person who falls into a very light sleep while he is standing or sitting besides leaning on something, right? So if a person is sitting like this and he falls asleep, a very light sleep, and what is the criteria for differentiating between light and deep sleep? The scholars mention that he understands the whereabouts and the surroundings where he is. So if I fall asleep over here and I'm in light sleep and someone says, "Oh Imam," I can listen to them and I wake up, that is considered to be light sleep. But if I'm in deep sleep and the entire Imam Masjid is saying, "Oh Imam," and I don't wake up, that is considered to be deep sleep. So light sleep only doesn't break your wudu while you are standing or while you are sitting down. But if a person falls into light sleep while they are lying down, that breaks your wudu. Understood? So all kind of loss of consciousness breaks your wudu except when you are in light sleep while sitting or standing. Was that clear? This is also an issue that the scholars have differed. The Sahaba had differed on this a lot. So if you hear a different opinion, keep in mind there is a difference of opinion on this issue. The fifth point is touching the opposite gender, usually your spouse, with desire, with a sexual desire. So if a person touches his wife or the wife touches her husband with sexual desire, that breaks your wudu. But if it wasn't for sexual desire, if it was just a normal hug, then that doesn't break your wudu. But if there was sexual desire, then that breaks your wudu also without any barrier. If there was any barrier, then that doesn't break your wudu. And if there was no barrier and sexual desire, then that breaks your wudu. This is also an issue the scholars have differed upon. There's one opinion that says that no type of touching breaks your wudu. Another opinion says that any type of touching, whether it's with desire or without desire, it breaks your wudu. And that school of thought, which is the Shafi'i school of thought, they struggle a lot in Hajj and Umrah. Because in Hajj and Umrah, you are crowded with a lot of people, and it's very likely you're going to touch even your wife, even your daughter, even someone random. If you touch them skin to skin, your hand touches someone's hand, it breaks your wudu. And if it breaks your wudu, you need to go do a wudu again for your tawaf. So they struggle a lot in Hajj and Umrah. But the other schools of thought who don't take this opinion, they don't have this issue during Hajj and Umrah. And the opinion that we are inclined towards is that if you have desire, then that breaks your wudu. The last point is, or the second last point is eating camel meat. If you eat camel meat, that breaks your wudu. The Prophet ﷺ was asked that if we have goat meat, does that break our wudu? And the Prophet ﷺ said no. And then he was asked, what if we have camel meat? Does that break our wudu? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, we don't have much camel meat over here, but if you ever go to Saudi and they have camel meat, then try your best to do wudu. This is also an issue the scholars have differed upon. The last point is, if you wash a dead body, when a person passes away, it is a right upon the community to give him a ghusl, to wash his body before he is buried. The person who does the ghusl of that body, he needs to do wudu after he is done doing the ghusl, inshallah. So these are a few things that break your wudu. In general, nothing breaks your wudu until proven otherwise, meaning you have to prove someone has broken their wudu. And if a person doubts whether they have broken their wudu or not, they go back to what their situation was before they had that doubt. So for example, a person knows that they had no wudu and they doubt whether they did wudu or not, then the default is that they don't have wudu until they can prove otherwise. And if a person knows that they had wudu, they did their wudu and they doubt whether they broke their wudu or not, they continued their wudu until proven otherwise. And we'll talk more about this inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to be sincere in what we learn. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to implement what we learn. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this sincerely for Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reunite us in the gardens of Jannah with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions and his family members, just the way He gathered us in His beautiful masjid. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.